Oh my God. Mexico is falling apart.
Bruh.
Or is it?
You are fake news.
Well, that's what we're going to be talking about in today's special video. As you guys probably already heard, or maybe you haven't heard yet, it seems like Mexico is falling apart. Or Mexico's just protesting. It really just depends on who you're asking out there. So, in November 15th, which was this past Saturday, there was humongous protests in Mexico City, and there were protests all over Mexico. And granted, before this weekend was coming up, me and a bunch of my Mexican friends and other people that were discussing the matter, we were again on the edge of our seat to see exactly what was going to happen and how this was all going to manifest itself. Because there were planned protests in all the major cities across Mexico. Here locally in Merida, Guadalajara, Monterrey. I mean, you name the city, you name the area, there was some sort of protest, depending on the area, depending on the size of the protest. And again, for a lot of people out there that were, watching this closely, a lot of Mexicans, I thought, it was going to be a lot worse. It was going to be a lot bigger than it actually turned out to be. Now, granted, what happened in Mexico City was basically pretty big, off the walls. As you guys have seen, they definitely took it to the next level over there in Mexico City. And basically, what are they protesting against? Well, because a few weeks ago, on November 1st, during the Day of the Dead celebration, Carlos Manzano, a very popular Mexican mayor from Urupan, Michoacan, was with his family celebrating the holiday out in the public square when he was assassinated by a 17-year-old narco recruit. Manzano was very popular because he was openly combating the narco gangs in his city, and not only that, he cleaned out the local police department and corrupt policemen. Mexicans throughout the country saw this, and he gained a lot of popularity, not only in the state, but throughout the whole country. Things started to get rough in his area as the cartel started sending him threatening messages. So he asked the federal, government, basically the president, for help, which she ignored. She did eventually send help, but only for a few weeks. And during that time, again, the mayor, the guy that got assassinated, basically, he was making more videos asking for help. And long story short, eventually November 1st came along, and well, that's when it all ended. After that happened, again, the people were enraged, especially locally. And so there was a giant protest, which maybe you might have seen, in which they basically took over the government's palace in Michoacan. All right. And it was, again, labeled as a Gen Z revolt, a just, very similar to what happened in Nepal a few months ago or what have you. And basically, that's how it was all put out there, that it was just, a young person's revolt. And even when they were doing the initial revolt and things like that, people in Mexico were already calling foul on it. Again, didn't matter who you are in favor of. At the end of the day, even people that did vote for Claudia Sheinbaum and didn't vote for Claudia Sheinbaum, they were saying, hey, this looks like it was fabricated. This looks like, it wasn't as organic as they make it seem. Anyways, as time went on, there were more manifestations, again, more protests and stuff like that in the area of Michoacan. But eventually, they planned out to have a giant protest at Mexico City in front of basically the Mexicans' version of the White House, okay, the presidential palace. All right. And not only having a giant protest in Mexico City, but also having protests all over Mexico. And so again, this was all at first, it was all basically put out there and advertised as a Gen Z revolution, a revolt. Basically the young people that voted for Claudia, or people that are just apolitical, again, have no political affiliation of any kind. Basically, they were the ones that are very dissatisfied. And again, why is everyone so dissatisfied? Well, they're dissatisfied for many reasons. Obviously, the cartel violence in many parts of Mexico, not all parts of Mexico. Again, you guys know that Mexico's a giant country, and this is not affecting every single inch per se. But long story short, it is affecting a lot of Mexico. And on top of that, there's other things that are affecting a lot of Mexicans. All right, not affecting people like you and me, not immigrants, not expats per se. It's just affecting a lot of Mexicans. And so for a lot of Mexicans, again, things that we've talked about on this channel throughout the past months, everything from the digital ID to getting rid of cash and then just going to digital cash. There's just so many things, okay, besides the violence, all right, that people are just basically up in arms about. Again, the president is raising taxes. I could go on and on and on. And so, just like it might be happening in your country, where a lot of people voted for a president that promised certain amount of things, and then they came into power and basically went the complete opposite direction. Well, a lot of Mexicans feel that that same thing is happening here. And so, right now, the reason I'm covering this is to, again, shed more light on this whole situation, because the reality is that I'm not going to lie. Before the protests were happening, I thought that it was going to be a giant protest and it was going to get extremely out of hand and it was going to happen all over the country. But when I saw the protests that were happening here, the ones that were happening in Guanajuato, the ones that were happening in other parts, they were just basically peaceful demonstrations. In fact, I've been living here over 7.5 years. So it's not my first protest. It's not the first time I've seen something like this. And long story short, what I saw this past Saturday, across Mexico was basically the same kind of protest that I would see against AMLO, against Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, which was a past president. And basically, it was just the people that were of the opposing political party were just marching against him. So again, imagine in the USA that there's a small protest of Democrats against Trump, or there might be a small protest of Trump supporters against Biden. That's basically what it kind of boiled down to. When it was all across the country, where it got out of hand was in Mexico City. And again, it got out of hand in Mexico City because a lot of people said, hey, in order for us to make the biggest impact possible, we have to do it at the Capitol. We have to do it in front of Claudia Sheinbaum's, again, the president's front door. Okay. We got to, again, show her the power to the people. We got to show her the dissatisfaction that we have towards her. But the reality is that, again, besides that protest, okay, there was a lot of things that were going on this weekend all across Mexico. This weekend is Mexico's Buen Fin. Buen Fin is basically like the Black Friday deals that you guys get back in the USA. So out here, you know how you have the Black Friday deals, that happen throughout the whole weekend after Thanksgiving. Out here in Mexico, they have that long weekend this weekend. So a lot of people were not protesting. Most people were at the malls. Most people were out shopping and so on and so forth, trying to get the deals for the holiday season for Christmas that's coming up. That's what a lot of people were doing. On top of that, like for example, here locally in Merida, we had the fair, okay, the local fair at Shishmaquil. And long story short, everybody was at the fair. In fact, that was the news throughout the weekend, was all the crowds at the fair. In fact, the fact that there were so many people at the fair that it took them hours just to get out of the fair. That was a bigger story here locally than the protest. Okay, just to give you guys, some context. Okay, so I would assume that all across Mexico it is something similar. Now, where I live out here in Merida, Yucatan, we are very far removed from, let's say, Michoacan or Sinaloa or some of these areas out there that have, a lot more violence, where they have to deal with, the cartel, corrupt police, corrupt government, a lot more than we do have, deal with it out here in this part of the country. Okay. So that's also part of it. And there are other parts, again, there are parts of Mexico up north where Mexicans have to deal, with all this, again, government corruption, cartel corruption. We've talked about it multiple times here on the video, and in my videos on my channel, where I tell you guys, it depends on what part of Mexico you're in. It's either going to be a cartel member asking you guys, asking the vendors or the business people for a fee to conduct business, or it's going to be the government with a clipboard asking you for the same fees. And so the thing is that, like, at this point, for a lot of Mexicans in certain parts of Mexico, they are basically up against the wall because, again, the cartel is out of hand. Okay, for many people in many areas of Mexico. And now the government is getting out of hand. Instead of maybe one combating the other, it seems like they're both in cahoots together. But again, this is just the point of view of an outsider. Okay, I'm an immigrant here in Mexico. I've only been living here in Mexico 7.5 years. I don't have the full context of the full history of everything that has happened in Mexico throughout the decades. I have tried to educate myself and learn, and I've done a lot of videos and live streams, talking about this stuff throughout the years. But the reality is that, again, my opinion is only my opinion. I'm only telling you guys what I see from boots on the ground, from being out here, all right, and speaking the language and seeing similarities between what's happening here and what's happening perhaps in the USA or Canada or other countries around the world. And so this is why I offer my unique perspective. And so yes, the reality is that there are a lot of people that are extremely dissatisfied with the president and with the government at the moment. But there's also a lot of people that are extremely satisfied and happy with the government. And there are people that, again, they're so dissatisfied with the government that they want Trump, for example, to come and invade. Well, on the other hand, there are people that are, complete supporters of this government and Claudia, and they don't want Trump. They don't want anything, and they support every single thing that she's doing 100% or the majority of it. So it's just like the same thing that's happening in your country. Okay, I can only speak as an American because that's where I'm from, but the same thing that's happening in the USA, whether it was Biden as president or Trump as president. Okay, you're going to have people that are just going to be, supporting one side or the other no matter what happens. But as time, continues to move forward, more and more people are figuring it out that, again, it doesn't matter what side you're on, they're both the same side. And so more and more people are, again, going towards the middle. This is why when these protests, were, first announced and all this stuff was starting to, go on again, when they, unfortunately killed, Carlos Manzano over there in Michoacan. I really thought that this was going to get out of hand because things, again, there's been a lot of dissatisfaction ever since the president has become president, just like in the USA. In the USA, there was a lot of hope and a lot of, a lot of people, they were expecting something, to happen, with Trump as president, and the complete opposite happened. So for a lot of people, they feel the same way out here. And so, as the months have gone on, again, we're already a year into her presidency. There's a lot of people that are extremely dissatisfied, and again, I hear it all the time. And so, for me personally, I also thought, again, that these protests were really going to get out of hand, and only to find out that, outside of just a few spots, again, outside of just the regular, out of handness that these protests get, over there in a place like Mexico City, outside of just a regular norm protest, it seems like there's nothing really to see here. So for a lot of people, they probably just didn't do anything because they were scared, or they probably didn't care that much. Okay, because again, they were either shopping, for the holiday season, or they were at the fair, or they were at a festival, or they were at a concert, or they were just living their lives. So again, you guys have to remember, Mexico's a giant country, and it's not as homogenous per se as like in the USA, where a lot of these things that happen in Washington D.C. or happen in some of the major cities do affect a lot of the country. And there's a lot of more federal government involvement with the whole country. But out here, it's like every state and every region and every area is kind of governed on their own. There are many areas of Mexico that have no government involvement or even cartel involvement because the people have pushed away, and they're 100% sovereign and just doing their own thing with no government or cartel involvement at all. So again, it's a completely different country with a completely different culture and just completely different problems. All right. But the reality is that, is Mexico falling apart? No, it's not at all. In fact, right now, if you look at the numbers and you look at really what's going on with the country, we're seeing more investment than ever before. We're seeing more people moving to Mexico than ever before. Safety, it's actually getting safer out here. despite what you might say, and despite the numbers. Again, I mean, I could go on that, but that's not what this video is about per se. There's a lot of people that, again, they feel like the country is becoming more dangerous and more insecure, and it is in some areas, but other areas are becoming safer and more secure. But look, long story short, the economy is booming, the country is booming, as the rest of the world is basically faltering and trying to just keep it together. Mexico is headed in the right direction. Again, I see what's happening in Europe, in the USA, in Canada, and other parts of the world, and compared to what's happening here, I mean, come on, you know what I mean? Like nothing's happening here. I mean, just compared to what's happening over there. And so the reality is that I think that for a lot of people out there, there's really nothing to worry about, except the fact that, again, what I've always talked about on this channel, the fact that the Mexicans, they have freedom out here. And this is part of that freedom. The fact that they're always, making sure that they have that freedom, but they have to, again, stand up for their rights. So again, as I've discussed before in other videos, a lot of Mexicans, how they end up, basically revolting is by just simply not participating or just doing their own thing. And again, the enforcement agencies out here, are not as they are in other countries. And so the Mexican people here have a lot more freedom than we do back home. But even they know that that freedom, again, comes at a cost. Again, if they don't protect that freedom, if they don't protest, if they don't make their voice heard, if they don't do the things that they do in order to make sure that their freedoms are not trampled on, well, guess what? They're not going to have any freedoms. And so that's one of the reasons I love Mexico so much. And things like these protests, or whatever protest, or whatever happens out here, when it comes to that, are things that I love about this country. All right. Again, I am apolitical. I've mentioned it a gazillion times before. Most of you guys already know how I feel about politics. It doesn't matter what country we're in. And so, with that said, a lot of Mexicans also, they have my same sentiment. Okay. And they have, throughout the years, throughout the decades, found a way to always get around all this, government intervention or cartel intervention or whatever it is. And again, one thing that I want to mention is that we cannot, we cannot just gloss over the fact that the U.S. probably has some involvement in this as well. As you guys already know, they are the masters at destabilization. And again, not just the United States, but other powers that be. Again, I don't talk about too much about that stuff on this channel, but long story short, there are other entities out there, okay, that are basically trying to bring down Mexico, just like they're trying to bring down other countries in the rest of the world. But the resolve of the Mexican people and the strength of the country itself, and just the way that things are, going on out here at the moment. Again, the people in power, whoever they are, they're finding it extremely difficult to really make any kind of dent out here. All right. And so the reality is that most Mexicans know this. Okay, most Mexicans are fully aware, okay, of the outside pressures, all right, that are trying to influence Mexico, and they themselves are also trying to, make sure that, well, that Mexico stays Mexico, all right, and that goes a lot further beyond, all right, just hey, we gotta, keep Mexico homogenous, and we gotta keep Mexico Mexican. What they really mean by that is the fact that, as the world is turning into the Great Reset, or the New World Order, or whatever it is, Mexico is doing everything humanly possible to not be a part of that, even though the government might be moving them in that direction. And again, who is moving the government in that direction, and what's going on with all that? So there's a lot of things in play here, and most Mexicans are fully aware. And most Mexicans, again, they have a sword that they're going to die on. All right, and it might be this, or it might not be this. But for a lot of youngsters and a lot of people of the opposition political party, well, again, they're out there in full force, defending their freedoms. And that's as simple as that. And just like you would see it if again, it was a, let's say it's a right-wing president in Mexico, then you're going to see a lot of left-wing protest. Okay. But again, what made this unique is that a lot of the protesters weren't necessarily right-wing, they were just no wing. So Anyways, with that being said, I really hope you guys enjoyed today's talk, today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed some of the images that I showed. And again, again, today's video was a little bit impromptu. It wasn't something that I was planning on, but I felt I had to, record something, talk to you guys about this, and again, publish a video on it so that you guys have a little bit more information as to what's going on. And then again, I want to open up the comment section. I want to open up down below. For your guys, opinion. I would really like to hear what you guys have to say about all this. And again, if for anyone out there that's a Mexican, all right, please let me know what what your thoughts on this are, because please, I know that again, I am just one man with a horse here. All right, again, I am an immigrant, and I'm trying my very very best to again understand everything that's going on. And I really want to know what you guys have to say or what your thoughts are out there. So again, guys, I really really appreciate you guys. Again, please, if you haven't already subscribe. 50% of my viewers are not subscribed yet, so please subscribe if you haven't already. If you're this deep into the video, come on, it's free. It's the least you could do, right? And if you don't want to subscribe, at the very least, leave a like. All right. So you already know the deal, guys. If you like this kind of content, don't forget to please like, please subscribe, please share, please the bell icon. But more importantly than anything else, please continue to stay awesome. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye, guys.